Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us. Today's subject is helping adopted dogs settle in and adjust to change. Our presenter today is Cathy Madson, who became a certified dog trainer in 2008, but she likes to think that her career began when she was 6 years old and a stray wandered into her yard and became her first dog companion. Since then, she has never been without a dog at her side. Currently sharing her life with 2 Cardigan Welsh Corgis, she is a certified professional dog trainer and a certified behavior consultant in canine, as well as a fear-free certified professional. Cathy is a member of the Association of Professional Dog Trainers, a training professional member of the Pet Professional Guild, and a member of the Dog Writers Association of America. Cathy is committed to helping humans and their pets build a strong relationship based on trust and clear communication, and the use of positive reinforcement training methods. Her previous work in companion dog training as an on-staff shelter trainer and experience managing a dog daycare has given her the opportunity to work on a variety of behavior issues. Cathy now focuses on expanding pet owner education and encouraging proactive teaming work at Preventive Vet. Her specialties include canine separation anxiety, leash reactivity, and dog aggression. We welcome Cathy.
Thank you, Carolyn, and thank you everyone for joining me today to talk about such an important topic. With the COVID-19 pandemic, what's been a bright spot is that a lot of families have opened their homes to adopting dogs or fostering dogs, and that can be a big adjustment for both the people and the dogs that we adopt and foster. But we also want to think about the changes that are coming, what will be the new normal when these families go back to work or their children go back to school. And so today I want to talk about some transitional training, things that we can set our adopters and foster volunteers up for success and helping them help the dogs settle in and adjust to any change, whether that's going to be the change right after adoption or the change that's coming and changes that happen throughout the life of the dog. So I always think about how I can set adopters up for success with their new family member that they're bringing home. And one of the most important things that we can do for these adopters is really get into some adoption counseling. So listening to them, listening to what their lifestyle is, what their desires are for adding a dog to their family, but also talking about what it is to bring in a dog after adoption, and especially with dogs who might have been rehomed multiple times or dogs that we don't know their history. It's important to manage the expectations of adopters and set them up for success by letting them know that there's often some behavior and training regression that's totally normal that happens after being rehomed and joining a new family. And I know that one of the most common ones is house training. So a lot of families will adopt an older dog because they're thinking, well, I don't want to deal with all the puppy behaviors, right? I don't want to have to deal with house training a new puppy. And then they're surprised and they get really frustrated when that older dog has potty accidents when they first bring them home. And that's actually a pretty common regression. We see that quite often with dogs coming into a new environment, starting a new routine. And so if we just start to tell these adopters when they're adopting dogs, hey, be aware that there's some things that might pop up. Don't freak out quite yet. Here's what to do to make sure that that dog adjusts to the new lifestyle, and that if there's potty accidents, maybe it only happens a couple times, but if you follow this routine, you're going to set them up for success, and that should go back to normal. So providing them with that information pre-adoption, giving them proactive and preventive education. There's lots of resources out there now at preventivevet.com. We have tons of articles for pet owners about how they can help dogs adjust, how to set up safe spaces, how to potty train. So finding things that you can share with the adopters to set them up for success is so important. I love the booklet, Love Has No Age Limit by Patricia McConnell and Karen London, 2 great animal behaviorists. And it's a really short booklet that really talks about the adjustment that these new adopted dogs are going through. And they have discounted rates for shelters so that you can buy in bulk and give to adopters, or just point the adopters to this. It's on Amazon, and I think it's only $2 or $3 to get. And that has so much information that will help the dogs and the people figure out their new lifestyle together. And then I also recommend connecting with a local certified dog trainer near you who might be able to provide some post-adoption counseling as well, which takes a burden off of your staff and volunteers. And what's great during the pandemic is a lot of us dog trainers have moved our services online and are doing a lot more virtual training sessions, which really opens up our schedule and our availability. So if you just reach out to some certified trainers and behavior consultants near you, they're more than likely to be happy to help and set these owners up for success. One thing I like to share with adopters is the adjustment period. And you might be familiar with this. It's the rule of threes that trainers and consultants always talk about when it comes to the adjustment period, the transition period for dogs. And this is where we say 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months. So 3 days, when we first bring a dog into a new home, we're seeing kind of a shut down dog in most cases. So more subdued behavior. It's that period of shock after such an abrupt change, especially if they've been in a shelter facility and more stressed and anxious, and then they're transitioning into a more stable home environment. They're just working through the shock and the change, and the chemicals in their brain are starting to come back down to normal. Then at about 3 weeks, we're starting to really see a dog show their personality and their regular behavior. They're starting to feel more at home. They're figuring out, okay, I'm staying here. I'm not going anywhere. I think I got this. This is when we start to see some of those problem behaviors pop up. And they might have been behaviors the dog did before, but they just weren't exhibiting them because they were more in shock and more subdued. And so this is when I have a lot of clients post-adoption call me and say, I don't understand why this is happening all of a sudden. What do I do? And it really isn't until about 3 months or so that the dog really settles in and begins to understand the new routine in their new home and the house rules and the expectations that the family has for them, as long as the new adopting family has been consistent in what they're expecting from the dog and in their training. And this is just a rule of thumb. It's not, 3, 3, 3 for every dog. It can be less time. It can be more time. For the more timid, cautious, or fearful dogs, it tends to take longer for them to truly settle in. But for dogs, young dogs like puppies, usually we only see the first 3 days to a week where that big change is happening. And that's mostly due to the fact that they're no longer with their litter. So that's quite an extreme change for them. To learn how to sleep alone, not next to all their little warm brothers and sisters. But after that, they tend to really settle in and get started with their normal routines. It's more of the older dogs that have been rehomed multiple times that take longer and have a harder time adjusting. But just letting our adopting families know there is this adjustment period. This is kind of what it looks like. So be aware. That can really help them be set up for success, in that you're managing their expectations, and it really increases the compassion that adopting families have for these new pets. And I always like to talk about how adjustment isn't just after adoption for these dogs. There's obviously the post-pandemic adjustments that we're all going to be making. So if families brought home a new dog while they've been working from home, or the kids are at home, they're going to go back to work, right? The kids are going to go back to school. And that is a big adjustment, especially if these dogs haven't gotten any practice being left alone and they've settled into this routine where there's access to their family all the time. And then all of a sudden there isn't. And that's a big adjustment. So we'll talk a little bit about what adopting families can do in a few slides here. But there's also the adjustment that happens throughout life. So new family members, new babies, elderly parents moving into the home, or adding another pet to the family, that's an adjustment. Or there's a loss of family members, whether that's a pet that they might have spent all of their time with in that home and that's no longer there, or a human family member. That's a big dynamic change. There's also things like moving, right? They could move across town, cross country. That's an environmental change as well as a routine change. So especially for adopted dogs, depending on their history, that can be quite stressful and spike anxiety for them. And then there's future travel plans. I know if you're anything like me, I'm really hoping to take vacation once things get back to normal. So it's a temporary routine change, possible environmental change for these dogs while they're boarded or with a pet sitter. And so preparing them and giving them the coping skills ahead of time will really help manage the anxiety through that temporary change. And then adopting family members might be starting a new job or getting a new work schedule or even retiring, right? Those are all adjustments that will happen throughout life that we want to set these dogs up for to have the coping skills and be flexible with change. So when we talk to our adopters, the first thing they ask is, what do I do when I bring the dog home? And one of the first things that pops to my mind is, well, we want to get them on a routine so that they know what to expect, right? Routines are really helpful. Just like for humans, healthy habits make us feel safe, less anxious, because we know what to expect next. And dogs aren't spending all of their energy thinking about, where is my next meal coming from, right? Where am I going to sleep tonight that's safe and secure? And so we want to make sure they know their basic needs are being met on a regular basis so that we take away that anxiety. But I've seen routines backfire when they're really rigid, when we don't have any variability within their daily day-to-day, right? We don't want to have a schedule that's the same every day, because if anything pops up, like an emergency, or if you have to stay late at work in the office, or you get invited out to happy hour, want to go to dinner with friends, or if the children have an after-school activity that you need to go to, you want your dog to be able to cope with that slight variation in their day. So I always actually suggest to clients, aim for a structured day, not a rigid routine. Make sure that you're not keeping it so strict that your dog can't handle a little bit of change, right? So mix it up a little bit. Obviously, you want to make sure they're getting their meals and their walks and their exercise all regularly, but change it up a little bit throughout the daily routine. One thing that I think more pet owners need to do is provide enrichment for our dogs. And enrichment is so important, especially for adopted dogs who might be dealing with some anxiety. It's a great stress reliever. And all it is it's a way for them to work their brains and then to work their natural doggy instincts, right? To take those great skills that they have and put them to work. So it's a great energy burner and relieves stress. One of my favorite ones to do is the sniffari. It doesn't cost me anything, right? It's just another walk with the dog where the dog gets to take charge. So they're on leash, and as long as it's safe, they get to decide, okay, I want to go over here next, and I want to sniff this, and I want to sniff it for a long time, right? They get to do that. And then they can stand there, stare at whatever it is they're staring at for as long as they want. They're working that olfactory sense, and that's such an important sense for a dog. It's so much brain work for them, and it's a great way to burn energy, relieve the stress. So I recommend telling adopters ways that they can enrich their dog's life, like the sniffari, but especially if they have a breed mix that, say, loves to dig, so terriers, creating a dig pit in the backyard is a great way for them to work those natural instincts and those natural drives, and also prevent unwanted behavior like digging in the garden, right? Things like nose work, different dog sports, training. Clicker training is technically enrichment. Anything that you're adding to the dog's environment that's working their brain is enrichment. And then another one you can do, I love licking mats. You can see my dog on the bottom right there. My new puppy is working on a licking mat in his pen. This is the first day he came home. He's working on a licking mat with my other older dog outside of the pen, also working on her licking mat. So it's enrichment, but it's also a way to kind of help calm their mind down. Licking is a very calming behavior for dogs, and really create a positive association with, oh, hey, there's this older dog over there, as well as for her, where she was thinking, why did you bring this puppy home? He's crazy. So it's a way to really build calm behaviors around each other and enrich the environment. Another thing I suggest to help dogs adjust after adoption is setting up a safe space. And this is going to be important for practicing alone time as well, when owners start to leave their dogs alone. But a safe space is somewhere where your dog feels secure and safe. It's dog proof, so they can't get into any trouble or eat anything dangerous or toxic. And it's especially great for puppies who might be going through house training or crate training. You can see Fozzie Bear, my puppy, here in his safe space. And you want it to be somewhere soothing. You want it to be where the dog thinks of it as their room. This is where I go when I'm feeling a little, not sure about something. And this is where people won't bother me. I can just relax and calm down. You can certainly use just a crate for this, but you want to make sure that the dog is happily crate trained, that they see that crate as awesome, right? That they don't get anxious being crated and confined. So I actually recommend play pens, larger exercise pens set up for adopted dogs where we don't know their crate training history, or just using a separate room with a gate to block off that doorway. And then you want to add some other soothing parts to their safe space. So I really recommend noise masking. I use just a box fan by Fozzie Bear's Safe Space, and I turn it on for some white noise. But people can use radios, right? A lot of people will go straight to classical music, which is great for stress reduction. But there's also studies that show that reggae music and soft rock music also work to lower stress levels and cortisol levels in dogs. And those studies were done in shelters where we know that they can be quite stressed because of the noise. So they can mix it up from Mozart. They don't always have to have it on the classical station, but they can also use sound machines, anything to mask outside noises that might startle a dog out of sleep or keep them in an aroused level and an anxious level because they can't see where is that sound coming from. And if they hear a sound, a lot of dogs will alert bark. And again, that's just keeping them at a higher level of arousal when we want them to just feel calm and safe and secure. Another thing that you can add to a dog's safe space are calming pheromones. ADOPTI is probably the most well-known, and they have a plug-in diffuser that you can plug in the same room. There's also travel spray that you can spritz in the safe space. And there's some studies that show, especially for puppies, those pheromones can have a great calming effect. It's just a synthetic version of the pheromone that a nursing mother is putting out while she's nursing her litter. So it really, again, works that olfactory sense and provides that sense of security through smell for those puppies. And I really recommend that new pet owners set up a pet camera for their dog's safe space so that they can check in on their dog, right? They can see what's going on when they're not in the same room or when they start practicing leaving their dog alone. It's so helpful to be able to see the symptoms of any anxiety that aren't quite so obvious. So you can hear a dog barking and howling when you're not in the room, but you can't see if they're pacing or if they're licking themselves obsessively or if they're chewing on things. So having a camera is really helpful to be able to see what's going on, and it helps determine the training and behavior modification that we do afterwards. And it's also a great way to track the success of training, because then we can see, okay, before they were barking for 15 minutes, now they're only barking for 10. So what we're doing is having some effect. Or maybe it's not, and we need to adjust something, right? So it's a great way for us to keep an eye on our dogs without having to be in the same room. So this is the big one that I am hoping new dog owners are really going to start practicing sooner rather than later. So if we encourage new adopters to start this as part of their new daily structure as soon as possible, we're going to help prevent so much separation anxiety because the dog will have learned that being alone is okay, right? And so when their owner goes back to work, it's not going to be a huge routine change for them. So desensitization and counter conditioning are the bedrock of behavior modification, especially for separation anxiety, both for treatment of separation anxiety and for prevention. And desensitization is just teaching the dog and acclimating them to our comings and goings and being alone, right? It's no big deal. It's not a big event that you need to get amped up for. It's just something that happens throughout the day, nothing you need to worry about. And when we talk about counter conditioning, we're conditioning their brain to associate the owner leaving with good things happening, right? So especially for dogs who might have a negative history with being left alone, we're really fighting against that previous reinforcement history, the association there, and we're changing that from a negative emotional response to a positive emotional response. And when we do these things, we're doing it in very small increments. And I like to use extra special stuffed treat toys for this because I need a way to reinforce the dog on a longer term. So if I am standing there and I'm giving a treat, that's like a split second for the dog. I need to have something that's rewarding them and something positive that's lasting a lot longer. So things like the West Paw Topple are great. I love these. It's the blue one there you can see with Fozzie. It has a larger opening on top. So this is great for puppies or for dogs who don't have experience with these stuffable toys. It's a lot easier to empty versus the Kong, which you can see on the right. That's a smaller opening. So it takes some practice to learn how to de-stuff a Kong, and it can be harder to get things out of there and truly empty it. And so I like starting with something easy or making the Kong easy to de-stuff, because I don't want a dog in a state of frustration and then give up because they can't figure out this puzzle toy while they're left alone. I want them to just think, this is great. I love this thing. And it lasts for a long time. And then usually they're quite tired afterwards and they'll settle down and take a nap. So when owners start practicing leaving their dogs alone, I always drive home the point that we want to start really small. We take that entire event and we slice it into really small pieces, like bite-sized pieces for these dogs, so that we don't push them too far too fast and actually create anxiety. So we start with very small duration of absence, and then a small distance that we go during that absence. So when I practiced with Fozzie, when I first got him, and I'm building it up right now, we started with just going into the crate, and then I would turn and I walk across the room, right? And then the next time I'd walk down the stairs, and then the next time I'd walk out of the room, close the door, and eventually now I can walk 3 floors down because I live in a townhome, make some lunch, right? And come back up, and he's doing just fine having been alone. But I started with that foundation of just a couple seconds, and I'm still technically in sight, right? But I'm further away. So we work in small increments and build on that. I like to use a cue. I use "I'll be back" to tell him I'm about to leave, and then I scatter treats in his crate or his safe space, or I give the treat toy for him to start working on, and then I leave. And I have a video to share where you can see this in action with him practicing alone time, both with the treat scatter and with the Kong. Go to crate. Good boy. I'll be back. I'll be back. So it's pretty simple. It's not a tough exercise to do. We just have to make time to do it. And I like to practice this throughout the day as training setups. But pet owners can practice this, you know, they start working in a different room and then they give the treat toy. They go out to check the mail or they take the trash out, whatever it might be, just building in those small instances of practicing alone time to help these dogs adjust to something that is going to be a normal part of life. So desensitization and counter conditioning is used for both preventing separation anxiety by practicing that alone time before a dog has anxiety. But if we're not sure if a dog has separation anxiety, it's important to point pet owners in the right direction as far as, do they really? And then what do we do if they do have separation anxiety? So I highly recommend checking out Calmer Canine's free online assessment quiz to determine the likelihood of separation anxiety in a dog based on the common symptoms of separation anxiety and then also on the severity of those symptoms. Some clients post-adoption, they're like, wow, my dog's having potty accidents. I think that they have separation anxiety. That might not be true. Hopefully it's not true. Hopefully it's just that they're regressing in their house training. You know, they're really young, so they never really learned house training. But depending on the severity and the context of those things, it could be anxiety. We want to make sure that those dogs get the help they need sooner rather than later. So you can point your adopters to this quiz if they're worried about it. And there's some great follow-up resources that they get that talk about what to do and how to connect with a veterinarian and a certified dog trainer to get the dog started on any treatment needed. Whether that's the non-prescription Calmer Canine or prescription medication or just the behavior modification. things like calming supplements and the like, really creating that behavior modification plan with different modalities for what's best for the dog. And if we know a dog has separation anxiety, so if we happen to know the history of that dog and we know that they came into the shelter or rescue system because of separation anxiety, and we know that there's going to be an adjustment for them, we want to set that adopter up for success. So we want to talk to them about connecting with a veterinarian sooner rather than later, connecting with a certified trainer sooner rather than later, right, to get started on a systematic behavior modification plan. And then what I was excited about and happy to start introducing with my clients is actually the use of Calmer Canine before, during, and after any big routine changes. I did this with my dog, Suki. You can see in this picture, getting her Calmer Canine treatment when we moved. And she had manageable mild separation anxiety, and it would spike with big routine changes. But with that proactive anxiety treatment, my behavior modification, the desensitization and counter conditioning, I didn't really have to use at all because I saw such a drop in her anxiety symptoms. And I was surprised because usually it would take much longer. And so I've started introducing this as a proactive treatment, not just a reactive treatment. So that's something that you can consider before adoption for dogs with separation anxiety, starting that prior to when they're adopted and then passing that on to the adopting family so they can continue treatment and keep that dog under threshold. So thank you so much for everything you all do. You're so important in helping new adopting families be set up for success and keeping these dogs in their home. If you need more online resources to share with your adopters, please check out preventavet.com/separation anxiety or just preventavet.com for lots of other pet owner articles about training and behavior and health and safety. And then check out calmercanine.com as well, especially for your cases that have separation anxiety, to help support those new adopters and that